Hello everyone, welcome to the podcast Simply Being with Ajay Choudhary. And today we have a special guest, Shantanu Jog, who's currently Creative Lead Industrial Design at Ather Energy Design Studio. Hi Shantanu, nice to have you
Hi,
here.
hi Ajay, and
Uh,
thanks for having me.
uh, we know in our part of the world, a lot of brutal approach has been taken, when in terms of adoption of anything, be it digital
Hmm,
payments or the
hmm.
taxation regime. I know it's a controversial topic, but what do you think for the EV vehicles and the EV infrastructure? Should we take a similar approach, or like what's the way to go about it?
I don't think a brutal approach is necessary here. It is so. You like you've noticed, right? There's increase. So there are external factors that also affect change, in society, right? Like they don't have to be brought in by brought in through a brutal kind of or they don't have to be brought in through a sudden change that is just forced upon you. So, and I think in the case of EVs, in the case of EVs, I would say yes. I mean, it you you just you just have to I think there are external factors which will help, which will end up pivoting the market to EVs. One of the biggest things that externally at the moment is fuel prices, like petrol prices and diesel prices. So there's that. So when the price of fuel goes up, the price of transporting everything goes up, right? But then, so when you use EVs to transport goods to you, that significantly affects the actual end price, and in the end, it has an impact to how much an end customer pays eventually. So there are things that will organically happen, and I don't think forcing EVs is the way to go. Rather, it's more about, if an electric vehicle does more for you than your petrol vehicle, that the shift, would be more organic, more automatic, because if a company provides a product that is better, that does more for a user, I think the eventual shift will happen, and that's how it should be.
I agree with your point that economy of ownership, perhaps an IC vehicle in the future, completely would change. And you're right. The added benefit of having an EV vehicle with the kind of features that you can have and the convenience that it will offer you,
Hmm.
you're right. I mean, the economy will drive people to make this behavioral shift rather than asking people to be forcefully put into a track, and perhaps they will not like it anymore and they will dislike it even more. I mean, and
Yeah, 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 yeah.
the sales of EV in the last couple of months definitely tells us that Indians are rational and sensitive beings to economy, and we make sensible choices when they have to be made.
Hmm,
And
hmm.
that's where I think the EV revolution will flourish itself much more faster than people might have speculated uh, on the spreadsheets. So yeah, I completely agree with your point that this country is very sensitive, and it loves to grow organically, be it the way we design our cities and the way our part. I mean, it's a total cosmic chaos, if I can sum it up in that particular way.
Hmm.
So do you think? I mean, like the EV infrastructure has challenges, and I remember you had mentioned about this. We don't have to take a very monogamous, monolithic approach, to design infrastructure. We have to take the advantage of diversity by design. I want you to elaborate on your thoughts. I mean, it's a very interesting thing that you mentioned.
Hmm. In terms of charging, right?
In terms of charging, because you've been in Bangalore, you've seen how Bangalore has grown as a city.
Yes.
I've been born and brought up in Mumbai, and I've seen how the way this city functions. It's very different to what other cities function.
Right.
So infrastructure is a very different thing. I mean, come up with it in general.
Right. 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 So I think yes, the um, the approaches. I mean, India being so diverse, and right from geographic, like the geographical, the whole, the gradient of how cities are, in terms of, and there are conditions, which are climatic conditions. There are cultural aspects of every region that drive so many things around, that drive so many things around how every city and every town is designed and planned. There are things that already existed more than 100 years ago, which you can't really change, right? Like, so there are on a planning level, things have to, so yeah, things have to be built around those existing aspects of a city or a town. Um, so yes, we live in a very diverse place, and no solution, no, the one way to work with this is to create a set of solutions that work for every condition. So where maybe a certain kind of solution gets adopted more in a certain city, but in a certain other city, there's another kind of solution that uh, it gets favored more because it has a higher relevance to that place.
Yeah,
So charging, yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, we have a federal structure in our country where there are certain things that the center government actually comes up with ideas, and what you're proposing is the states or the ground level, these grassroots level organizations, people who are representing the communities, they have to come up with their own democratic way of adopting these ideas.
Right.
Yeah, it's a perfect way to really complement our democratic values in the country, and also taking the lead to this interesting infrastructure developments that have with EVs.
Right. So yeah, that's what, right. In Bangalore, you have a lot of small lanes and by-lanes, and then you then get you probably will have one major highway that cuts across the city, or two major highways that cut across the city, but then they cut through the city. You, of course, you do have peripheral roads now, and you do have roads that, so we have a nice road here, so that's so that road connects two ends of the city, and also parts lying in between, and you can now go from, say, where I stay to, you don't need to cross the entire city in order to be able to, say, drive to, say, Pune or something on those lines, or you don't have to cut across the city to drive to Mysore. So you can take that route, and you can just take up. So Bangalore is built that way, but then on the inside, it's still, you still have small lanes, you still have congestion. I think Mumbai has a very different structure altogether. Delhi, on the other hand, is vast, right? I mean, not Delhi specifically, but NCR, right? So, and the NCR being so vast, distances, and people commute on a daily basis. People commute with two-wheelers on a daily basis, and it's just huge. So, Chennai is pretty huge as well. So these are, and then you also have certain aspects of weather that come into the picture. So these are, on the other hand, my hometown Nagpur. So it is full of trees, but it still gets hot in the summer, and you like that. These are conditions that will eventually decide how infrastructure is built, and how you enable parking, how you enable charging, what you want to provide with all those amenities, right?
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
completely right. You're completely right. I mean, like, as the cities will grow, there will be definitely an emerging needs of, like how you mentioned about the bridges or special lanes that are being developed for convenience of people.
Hmm.
Infrastructure will also take its own course based on where it has to be there and where it doesn't need to be there. So eventually people will decide that we need a parking spot or charging spots here, and based on the usage of the city in general. So they don't have to be everywhere, as currently it has been laid out in the policy. It's too extensive, I would say,
Right.
and it does not necessarily have to be very mathematical approach of having a block by block and you have 3 charging station in this block. It has to grow in its own way.
Right. So again, right, that there's public charging, but then there's also home charging. So how do you incentivize home charging? How do you incentivize an apartment complex to enable charging for people in their locality? So these are questions that eventually we have to find solutions to.
Yeah, I remember startups like Bird and these micro scooter startups which came long time back in California. I remember a lot of bloggers were blogging that okay, I got micro birds at my home. I'm charging them and putting it on the parking spot, and it was incentivized. They were getting money for charging at their homes. So it really transformed the way people were behaving, and suddenly people became so civilized, that they're taking all these scooters, left out in open spaces and taking it to their home with the truck, charging it, bringing it back to the parking station, So if you see the business model, the whole way of running the mobility was
Hmm.
completely different.
Right,
And
right.
yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
The,
this is how it is going to be.
yeah, you get incentivized. I mean, that I think incentivization works. You when you say when you take, I think in certain countries when you take out the trash or when you recycle, you get benefits, right? Similarly, I think we do. There's a plan that I read about. I'm not sure if that's coming up anytime soon, but incentivizing people for reporting traffic offenders. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm quite yeah, I'm quite curious to see how that turns out.
Are you going to be the participant into this sort of an initiatives when it comes?
Oh, I already do. I
Okay.
already report traffic offenders, and it's a pet peeve of mine. I've uh, I've also been learning to deal with that in the over the past few years. But yeah, but it's you do get a certain level of satisfaction when so there's an app in Bangalore, and you can if you find someone coming by the wrong side or any, so there's a list of offenses, and if you have a picture that constitutes as proof, and you upload it, and if they find that yes, this is enough proof that the person is guilty of this offense, they'll give you a message that the person has been fined, and I think there's a decent amount of satisfaction to that.
It's quite interesting. I mean, you are very proactive citizen, I must say.
No, I mean, this is I don't think there's anything to do with my being a good citizen. It's more personal.
Okay.
This has no civic. I don't see a sense of civic duty. Yeah, it's just a thing I do.
I think a lot of people, even if they have a chance to complain, the people are little real shy because you don't know when the person will come back to you. Like you are the guy who is recording people.
I'm glad it's anonymous. The person who got you fined. If they find out, yeah, I'll have 100 people right now begging for my blood.
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, in our part of the world, I mean, this could be a hobby, for people, let's find these people who are actually reporting, for offenders, for traffic violations. So,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, there are crazy ways that we actually operate. But yeah, I'm really happy that the government has also taken some initiative, to make people come together and like participate in this exercise of civilizing people about traffic rules in general.
Right. Yeah. I think the what I've observed is even if you say show your indicator, or you stay in the right lane, or you say you flash your lights against an oncoming person because you want them to slow down because you're taking a turn, and all that has no effect on the other person on the road because they don't I don't think people understand what even the most basic even the most basic signals mean, or they don't care enough, and there are things that I think systemically will change eventually. Because there's only a certain point to which these things can go, right? Like eventually, it will become an annoyance for everyone, not
Sure.
just a few people. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a quite interesting topic, a little bit more away from our topic of the day. But
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I think we've
it's interesting actually to
yeah.
hear about this. I mean, and I would say, just to relate it to our topic, I would say that this is also a part of the infrastructure. How you make people civilized about the traffic, because
Hmm.
eventually all this thing will make the system work more smoothly, efficiently, uh, and yeah, I mean, and then people will expect for better things. That's, I think, one of the
Yes,
things that will
yes,
happen.
yeah. I think yeah, company. I mean, one is you inculcate this sense of responsibility that you are not alone on the road, and you have you also have other people that you need to care about. That's all.
Yeah,
You and that's one thing. That's the other aspect of roads and general conditions in cities and even outside cities, right? I think road conditions are I mean are generally an issue. So it's not like I mean, I might want to take a certain turn, and I might want to take the correct line when I'm turning, but then I can't because there's a huge pothole right in the middle of that line that
yeah,
I want to take, right? So it's not always, say, a certain person's fault that they're not riding or driving properly, but that's so that change has to happen everywhere. And I think even there, if you, I have, there's another, at least in Bangalore, there is there is a channel where you can report potholes, where you can report bad roads, and they do get fixed.
yeah, yeah. I understand. I mean, there's a when people start to see better things like EV scooters, for that matter, the moment they realize it's not making a noise anymore, it's very quiet.
Mm,
Then there is
mm,
a, I would say, there's a little behavioral shift that happens with the people. They stop
mm,
honking unnecessarily.
mm.
They try to be as careful as possible, because there are pedestrians who may or may not realize that there's an electric vehicle standing next to them or passing by them.
Right,
So
right,
people
right.
become more aware, and that's a very positive change. As you mentioned, it will happen
Mm,
because you
mm.
get better things, you start to behave better, you start to and there's a cascading effect, the snowball effect that happens with this sort of introduction of the right technology.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just divided into a different path, and
Yeah, yeah.
but, but
Quite a digression. Yeah,
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 yeah.
but yeah, just to bring ourselves back to the topic of the day.
Mm.
There is one part of the EV story where people are like, this is the way to go. And then there
Okay.
are proponents of EVs who are talking about, okay, if we are doing it, we should do it right. And we should also think about the life cycles of EV vehicles, the batteries, or extending their life cycles, by various usage. And I'm sure at Ather Energy, you must be, taking the steps to, direction. But I would love to know what's your thought about it.
Yeah, I think there's there's a there's a point not too far in the future that this will become a real problem, and there are companies which are already doing this in terms of end of life cycle for batteries, right? And specifically for cells. So you have companies like Redwood Materials, founded by JB Straubel, I think, who's ex Tesla, and there's a very interesting video on YouTube about how how he's been how that company is doing recycling cells, and you can you can they they go to the extent of recycling cells from all kinds of devices and vehicles, and yeah, certain initiatives like this have to be taken up. uh, so eventually you have to worry about where your products end up. So I mean, and that applies for any product, anyone who makes any kind of product.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I came across a recent article where Audi actually, is taking e-tron batteries and putting it into a three-wheel architecture. It was
yeah, yeah,
very
yeah.
surprising for me to see an Audi logo on a three-wheeler. We actually do it in this part of the world. Like, people are so obsessed with the four rings. And I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, now the Germans have decided to perfect this architecture with the Audi e-tron batteries.
Hmm.
It's kind of reassuring that even the bigger OEMs are not shy away from alternate mobility solutions.
Hmm. Hmm.
There is a connotations to every mobility solution, and I was surprised that they chose to experiment with three wheeler. it's quite interesting for me.
Yeah, that was quite interesting. Yes.
Yeah. Also, to talk about one aspect that there is a product, EV products that we are introducing to this current structure and infrastructure that we have,
Right.
and people are coming up with really, really interesting solutions for designing cities altogether. I remember in one of our conversation you mentioned about this, straight line cities that in Middle East they're trying out, so the whole way of moving across the city changes. And I read in Paris, they are trying to make it as pedestrian friendly, more bike friendly, and e-bike solutions. People can adopt. So going forward, do you think that we have to diversify ourselves into these solutions as well, and our obsession with four wheelers, taking four wheelers for every particular need to move in the city?
Yeah. Yes. So, what I would probably my take on this would be what is the contextual and way we can do this, right? Right from one is there's an urban planning aspect to it, right? And then there are days when, say, certain areas of the city are only pedestrian or only meant for pedestrians. So uh, understanding one of the biggest factors that will affect this will be understanding how, say, and this will be again these will be again very local solutions to every city and every town, because every place is built differently, every place grows differently, and understanding how relevant it is, and if say making it, yes. And I think one of the things that came up in the conversation we had was like how India at the moment is not pedestrian friendly at all, right? So, for example, in Bangalore, barring a few areas of central Bangalore, which again are very close to the which are very close to the main. There are so, but yeah, barring a few areas of central Bangalore, you you kind of start seeing a decline in as the city spreads out. You start seeing a decline in walking infrastructure, right? And I think that is, no matter what happens, no matter how a city grows, that needs to be taken care of, and it not only needs to be built, but it needs to be maintained. It needs to be kept useful, right? Like you might build a footpath, but then the very next day you might find the very next month you might find people parking vehicles there on a regular basis, or you might find shops springing up there. So of course shops need to, I mean, people still need to make their livelihood, but then is there a space that you can provide people where they can still are there smaller pockets where you can build these micro, I don't know, smaller markets where you can at least free up walking spaces for everyone, right? So some parts of a lot of big cities now have cycling lanes, which is a good step. But again, it's not just about building it or implementation, but it's also about maintaining it on a long term basis. Uh, yes, making cities pedestrian friendly, it is important, and at the same time, making sure that one is you need to be able to walk safely. These spaces need to be lit. These spaces need to be devoid of any surprises, like drain, like just you don't want to fall into a drain, right? You also don't want to, like, I think I've noticed a lot of these footpaths are extremely tall, and for older people and even for kids, like you still have to take that extra step of struggling to get onto those footpaths and struggling to get down from those footpaths. They are also tall, predominantly because they're designed for two-wheelers or other vehicles not to get onto them. But yeah, but how do we is there an intervention that can be created? I think certain places there are bollards which are put, right, so you can't enter. But are there other interventions that can be created such that people can walk safely, and you don't need to do something that is difficult for them to use, right? So again, it's about incentivizing usability. There's again, when you make a certain place pedestrian friendly, you also have to ensure that at a certain point, public transport is also a part of the equation. So you can still walk as much as you want, but eventually you need to be able to walk from point A to point B, and at least from point B you maybe need public transport available there. So these are, I think, so certain parts of every city will have really good working infrastructure, but then as you move out of the city center, it just dwindles, and none of it is maintained. So yeah, I mean, safety is crucial.
Yeah. I think you mentioned a very interesting point at the beginning of this question. Is about contextual design. It's a very broad topic, and it's a very
Hmm.
highly intellectual topic, to be very honest. Contextual
Hmm.
design, that you need to understand why you are doing certain things.
Right.
What are the habits and behaviors of people who are actually living in that space? Like how they would love to move in the center of the city, which is definitely pedestrian friendly, and then how would you like to move in this parts of the cities which are away from the city center, and so maybe a mix of a bit of forest and green spaces, so the idea of contextual design takes the forefront of for making decisions for design, uh,
Right.
and
I
then
uh, I would
that's
like to add one more thing to this, which is again, like lack of public spaces, lack of good public spaces everywhere. Like I think you in most cities you will not really see good public spaces, except in again in some central location of the city. Otherwise, as the city spreads out, the only public spaces that are left are probably gardens, and even those might, of course, they're not open in the night, right? So you you public spaces which are safe. Public spaces also become important in the case of someone who just wants to charge their vehicle for say 15 to 20 minutes. But why should a person charge for 15 to 20 minutes and then be forced to go to a cafe? And I mean, so these are questions that I think keep arising, and they keep coming up. And these questions will become even more important as the need for public charging becomes more apparent. So where does a person go, right? I mean, uh, the one thing that you would have seen is charging in terms of public charging points. These always are tied to a business, but as charging points become more location or host agnostic, and they become they are part of an urban environment, uh, the need for good public spaces also becomes equally important, and
I
which is, I think, lacking right now.
I completely find your idea to be very, very genius actually. Like why people have to go to a cafe, pay a 350 rupees for a coffee to get their free charging for their electric vehicles. Why can't they, connect with the nature, and the public spaces are designed, where they can relax and also make sure that their vehicle is charging. It's a very interesting concept where the context has taken a more approach of being what to say, empathetic to the user, not on the charging front but also on the physical being of the person, which is very interesting. I mean, these are the kind of ideas perhaps a lot of people are missing when they probably think about EVs in general. That
Mm.
it does not have to be only about business, but it's also about how you make communities better,
Mm.
which is a very interesting point that you made here. That EV revolution should not be stuck to how we created values in business and the economy, but there is also a side of how people will also benefit from the spaces.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, people when they live in certain parts of the cities, they choose it for a particular location and the surroundings. If it's really peaceful, if it's well connected or whatever,
Right.
and yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting thought that the parking spaces and the charging spaces itself are like a retreat for anybody in the
Mm.
city. It's quite an interesting thought actually.
Right. So yeah, I mean, eventually, as we like there are places where you you can't even say you can't even sit because they are noisy. They, I mean, while you might have a, so I think these I think there are too many factors to consider and there are too many hurdles to overcome. But I hope we do that.
Yeah, but I mean, a great idea that you proposed just now. I mean, that will probably spark somebody to think, okay, maybe we need to, rethink or disrupt the spaces that are there around in the city as well.
Right.
And this gives a little bit, I can say, a food for thought. That why not, rethink in this particular direction.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I think I mean, I do see a lot of city corporations in a lot of places taking steps to build good public spaces. I've seen quite a few in Bangalore. I've seen good public spaces in Indore as well. I've seen. I mean, I think Mumbai also has the advantage of beaches, and which are, I think, also a lot of these beaches have been cleaned up over the past decade, right? And these are, I think, such really good examples of that. So yeah, I mean, it's not all weak, and authorities and people have been taking steps together to at least bring in a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And safety.
Yeah, it's nice that you're tying up all the concepts of being human, not just by using the EV product, but also, thinking about the broader aspects of how we can tie it down to, better community living and not just having a very narrow focus on making only the product with the feature and with the touchscreen, but there's another aspect
Exactly.
of building a big context to this idea of EV revolution.
Right.
That's what an amazing thought,
Oh, thank you. I mean, I don't think it's an amazing thought. It's I think most of us would have had these thoughts. It's just whenever you say you roam around the city, whenever you walk, whenever you hang out, and these, I think, are thoughts that all of us have. There's nothing special about it. It's just about just putting them together.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we may naturally just do ideas like this to each other, but
yeah.
Like coming to the last question of the day, like a lot of design schools students, they are talking about how to do a mobility project, and I think one of the key aspects that personally when I see a project, what is missing is this aspect that beyond the product, like how are you going to really make this work. And that is where, as you mentioned about the context, about the thinking about the spaces around that makes a lot of difference. And I mean, any word of advice or tips or tricks that you think, like how people should approach for a mobility project if they really want to say work with Ather or any other EV OEM or a startup?
I think one of the So I think one of the things that I would emphasize upon would be start by understanding who you're building this for, who your users are. Start by an experience first approach. Start with a first principles approach. I think these are mostly fairly standard things, in terms of advice. But also maybe for on an educational institution level, these projects could be taken up as a team and as a team of multifunctional, rather students from different backgrounds who do this together. Like, for example, if someone wants to make new a brand new public transport which is electric, right? But then it's not it's not the job of it would not be fair for that project to be designed in isolation in terms of just the vehicle, right? So if someone from, say, someone from an urban planning department, a student, and this person, and then someone from maybe someone from industrial design and automotive design, and then so if they all work together on this, it could be in a span of a 6-month project, you can actually create something that is far more holistically fulfilling and and it's deeper. It's you also have get an understanding of where say is your city equipped for this kind of transport, or is your so of course institutions do that right now as well, where people have special projects, people also have system projects and all that. So I think it's just a matter of doing more of this, um, and not thinking about product in terms of the pure product or pure form, but starting with the understanding who your user is, uh, just speaking to people, talking to them, and not literally asking them questions, but more about understanding who they are, about through how they answer, how they talk to you, how they where they live, and how they go to work and back, or any other be it any other part of their community. So yeah, I think one is going in, not going through a. I mean, of course, there's always this bit of purely doing good form, and doing a project for as a form exploration, or an extension of what a certain brand could do it, and it's also fair, but maybe that shouldn't be your only project. Maybe you should do that, but you should also do something that is in a diametrically opposite direction, where you just you kind of work with a multitude of students, you work together, and you have to be from diverse backgrounds, so people from, like I said, urban planning, humanities, I mean, there are certain things that can make it so much more enriching.
I get your point that there has to be a little multi-dimensional approach that probably we have to take. And I think as a suggestion for the design schools, that we have to encourage students to not take a very myopic view on design. That is not just looking
Right.
at one's form and function, but also take a little bit of a bird's eye perspective to think about systems. And yeah, I
Right.
mean, system design is one project which is probably taken very less seriously by students, because it's
Mm.
not very exciting. But yeah, I mean, when you bring people from different backgrounds, you probably learn more, and you understand that this problem is not going to be solved by me making a product. It will be a collaboration, a very collaborative effort. And
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting suggestion that design schools can actually, like, a lot of design schools have people from diverse backgrounds, like product or industrial and transportation. They have some guys from animation also,
Right.
and,
Right. Right.
and maybe some from other fields. And like, yeah, I mean, I know the animation guys, they come up with really nice futuristic scenarios for their characters and their worlds, and that brings a little bit utopia into what you're going to imagine.
Correct. Correct.
And
Correct.
an architect will probably bring you about the real life dimensions, and the anthropology, and the ergonomics, and the way of building cities in the
Right.
right
Right.
way.
Right.
So
Right.
then suddenly you'll enrich yourself, and you'll have a lot of exchange of ideas, which will
Mm.
probably lead you into dimensions which yeah, I mean, sitting in a silo will probably not give you that sense of what do you say, empathize, as you mentioned.
Yes, yes, yes. And eventually, this is important because you will never work in isolation as a designer. You will always work with teams, and as you kind of grow into that job, you will work with teams from far more diverse backgrounds. You will work with engineering. You will work with product planning. You will end up working with product management and business, and you will work very closely with them. So it helps to have a larger understanding, a wider understanding.
Yes, you're it's an interesting suggestion for the design schools, that instead of trying to letting students work individually, I mean, there has to be this approach where people are taught to work in teams, so that it becomes very easy for them to assimilate into the industry,
Right.
and also to understand the deeper aspects of how to take relevant solutions and suggestions and incorporate into your design.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So yes, Shantanu, thank you. It has been wonderful. Like a lot of insights came from your side. It was very wonderful to chat on those. And
And thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. And this has been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, it's an honor to just come and talk about this. And thank you.
yeah, we have been discussing about this from a very long time. I mean, all these things are part of our conversations, but I mean, it was nice to finally document it and let people know what we think about this EV revolution that probably going to take off in some time.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm happy that you are part of it already from a very long time with Ather.
Right.
And hopefully we're going to see some really cool and exciting products coming from you guys in the future.
Yes. And yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I guess this is an exciting phase for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Ajay.